Right, Maths That's guys, welcome back to Matrix Uploaded. Let's have a look at some questions relating to the graph that we've drawn. Let's just quickly recap. If we look at the sheets of paper, what do we have? The expenses. This is one. Notice very interestingly, your expenses are way more than the income generated until you get to this point over here, which is called the break-even point. This is called break-even. And I don't know really what it is. Let's just drop down and see what we're getting. I don't know. It's not quite 125, so I'm not too sure. But at that moment, the expenses and the income are equal, and that's called break even. Okay, I'm going to write it up top here. Break even. Okay, at that point there. Okay, that's very important. Now we're going to get there how many posters that causes break even. So once he makes 100 and something posters, we can then say from there onwards he's going to make a profit. So in the beginning he's not making much money because he hasn't made many posters. Okay, so let's have a look at the first question. How many posters must Derek laminate in order to break even? Well, if we look at the graph, not possible at all. Okay, so let's have a look. There's our income and our expenses. So what we can do is we can say break even is when the income equals the expenses. So let's put the 3,000 plus 5N equal to the 300N. So we've got a bit of an equation here. Let's have a look. Well, very easy from grade 8 days. If you pop that across to the other side, we've got 25N equals 3,000 divide, and we have 120 posters, which of course makes sense. If you have a look at the graph paper, we're about 120 posters. So at that point, we're talking about 120 posters there. Okay, and it makes sense for break even there. Okay, let's continue with some other questions that could be asked. Use the graph to check the answer. Well, that we've done. We can see that it's 120 there. Okay, now use the graph to determine how much profit Derek will make if he sells 175 posters. Now, guys, if you have a look at 175 posters, let's go and have a look at the graph. Well, at 175, we can go up and say, well, what do we have? Well, for the expenses, we've got something here. I don't quite know exactly what, but it looks, I don't really know what it is. And for the income, I'm not too sure of what's going on there. Now you can estimate, maybe that's 5,200, maybe that's 3,000, but I'm not too convinced about this. Okay, in the web notes, of course, they've approximated, and you're approximately able to get what the income and the expenses are, and you can then say the income minus the expenses is your profit. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something more sophisticated. Let's have a look. Let's calculate the actual profit if 175 posters are sold. So there's the I. Okay, well, the income, if you've got 175 posters times 30 gives you this. And what do we know? We got 5,250. Hey, I wasn't too far off. Let's go and look at the graph paper. In other words, this is 5,250 at that point when you talk about income. Okay, let's continue. What about the expenses if we go back to the slide? If you say 3,000 plus 5 times 175, we got 3,875. Okay, and that's great because if you go back to the graph, we can see that that's going to be 3,875 at that moment there. Okay, that's 5,250. Lot more money than the expenses incurred there. Now, what do we know? The profit is the income minus the expenses, and we go 5,250, subtract that, giving us 1,375. That's the profit that that Derek's company makes by laminating posters. That's where he wants to be. He wants to keep making profit. So you can read it off graphically. If you go back to the graph, you can go up at 175. You can read off, and you wouldn't have been able to know in 5,250. And likewise with expenses, you wouldn't have been able to know 3,875. You could have approximated and then said income minus expenses on your approximate values. But the nice part with the equations, if you do what I've shown you, it works pretty well. Okay, the next thing in financial maths is something we call simple and compound interest. Now, let's continue with this. Okay, simple interest is what we're going to focus on now, and then we're going to be looking at compound interest. Okay, what is interest? Okay, interest is the money received or paid when saving or borrowing money. There are two types of interest. The one is simple and the other is compound. Okay, now let's have a look. We're going to start off with simple interest. Simple interest, guys, this interest is only paid on the original amount invested or borrowed. Now, consider 1,000 Rand invested for 3 years at 10% per annum simple interest. After the first year, the A, what have we accumulated? 1,000 plus 10%. Remember, as a decimal, times 1,000 is 1,100. Then you take the 1,100 plus 0.10 times 1,000 is 1,200, and then 1,200 plus 10% of the 1,000. Notice it's always the original, the one that you started with, and you keep making 100 Rand every time. Okay, now people, this is simple interest, where interest is paid on the original amount all the time. In the next lesson, we're going to explore a formula for simple interest and then look at compound as well. So stay with us, and we'll see you very shortly on Matrix Uploaded.